after midnight, back at Midnight Studios. Fuck around, got my wrist right. Brick wiper, take a spray, yeah, you put the residue on ice, nice. Price on your baby mama head, no lights, Christ. Chap T on the Gucci knit, out the Cabeva, shooting 2 Uzis on some movies.
So for the past few weeks, I've been doing my best to do music strictly 100% within my DAW, which I use Ableton, and it's been very challenging for me because it's something that I'm not used to, but it is something that I want to exercise a little bit more and just understand the software versus my hardware. I come from hardware, and this is where I feel at home using my MPC, sampling, sequencing drums, and then just stemming those tracks out into my DAW and just giving it a quick master. That's how I've been working for the past few years. But going into the future, I really want to learn and understand the flexibility what a DAW can give us when producing a track. By all means, I'm not the type of person that's just saying I would only use hardware, I would never touch a DAW. I'm very open-minded. I want to understand, because I will tell you right now, from the little that I've learned from Ableton, there's so much flexibility, more that I could do when it comes down to finessing samples versus how I would do it in hardware. So I don't want to go completely software or completely hardware. I'm trying my best to find a 50-50 or a middle ground between both worlds and use the best from my software and also from my hardware. And now, if you're somebody that's just getting started with music and does not know, should I go hardware route or software route, I highly recommend, especially if you're just getting started, to focus on one or the other, because there's a lot to learn. And if you're trying to go both ways, you're probably gonna be stuck in the middle and not know how to be proficient in one or the other.
Keep your mind on your maschine. Horror form a classic, it's drastic. Villain hydrochloric acid, splashed it, pull it on.
Now, some of my pros and cons from working in a DAW, some of the great things that I found as I'm producing tracks in a DAW, especially when it comes down to sample-based production, working with Ableton, they have such amazing features like time stretching, warping, which the MPC also has, but it's nowhere as good with what you would find in Ableton. Here I've noticed that I've put in a sample and I've been able to warp it, pitch it up, pitch it down, and the tempo stays the same and it sounds really good. Now, when I try to do that with my MPC, I'm just not a big fan of it. I never talk about it in my videos because it's something that I don't really find myself using, or is not acceptable when I'm producing a track. I just don't like the sound of it, so I don't mess with it even though it gives us that option. I feel within a DAW, it's just light years away from where we're at with hardware. And especially if you're trying to deal with samples, time stretching, pitching up or pitching down, this is a really good tool to use when we want to manipulate our samples. And now, another thing that I really love about working in a DAW, and I'll tell this day, is why I still, when I export my tracks or bounce my stems, I still touch the DAW, is because it gives you the flexibility of using plugins. Now, plugins, there's thousands of plugins out there. There's so many great plugins that you'll find for mixing and also for mastering, which will enhance what you're putting out. As you see right behind me, I have some of my personal favorite plugins that I will use. I just feel very comfortable with some of the UAD plugins that when it comes down to mixing or mastering, these are my go-to plugins. I feel like nothing in our MPC comes close to what I get with some of these type of plugins. And now, talking about the flexibility of plugins, I also want to touch up on the flexibility of rearranging, just putting together an entire song when it comes to intro, verse, bridge, outro, certain effects. Like, it's just a lot more intuitive when you have a dedicated display to just select certain audio clips and just repitch them, reverse them, drop out a quick bridge, or just drop the drums out for a few bars and bring them back in. It's just so fast once you have your track laid out on the arrangement view. And now the MPC, it will give you tools like the grid editor that's very similar to what I would get in this arrangement view, which I really love about the MPC, that it gives you that page. But just coming in right here with a DAW in general, it gives you so much more tools. I feel that you could be a lot more creative if you want to. And last but not least, I really do enjoy having the option to mix with professional plugins and also master your track when you're finished with it, right on the spot within the same session. It just gives you all those tools at your fingertips, so when you're ready to export, you're done. You don't have to bounce tracks. Everything is already right there, ready to go. Now, I'm sure I'm missing so much more pros with working in a DAW, but those are just a few that I've really enjoyed while I've been producing in Ableton. But some of the cons that I also ran into, and some of the stuff that was a little frustrating, I'll start off with simply just so many options. I'm used to my hardware, which it does give you tools, it gives you plugins, but it's nowhere near as what I get right here in my DAW. And I do notice that there's this beat that I worked on that has taken me days to finalize it, because I keep going back and adding a different plugin, or I keep trying to reverse this clip and do this intro different, the outro, there's so many things that I can do. I'm just stuck, and before I know it, I'm taking this track to a whole different direction that I'm like, man, why am I thinking about it so much? Versus when I'm on my MPC, I feel like I'm moving so much quicker. And now the other thing that I really found, this is personal. I'm not sure, I'm not here to do a test or A and B, but this is, I don't know if it's just me, but the sound quality. I've been working with hardware, whether it's your newer MPCs or you got MPC 2000 XL, but when it comes down to stemming out your tracks, say I want to stem out my drums, then my sample, and then my bass, there's this sound quality that just feels different to me, and that I cannot replicate when it comes into just dragging loops or drum breaks or samples straight into my DAW. But when I'm stemming out through an actual 1/4-inch cable, I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's just me, but it feels different. It sounds different. It hits different. And that's something that I'm missing from just dragging tracks or MP3s or WAV files into my DAW. And now something else that I just found myself so frustrated. And again, this is me because I'm just not so used to working in a DAW, but chopping up samples, especially in Ableton, has been so frustrating. I know they have Simpler or Sampler, I'm not sure what the plug is called, but I've been slicing up my chops manually, and it's been so frustrating. Like I'm ready to give up on it when it comes down to slicing up samples. And that's the thing that I will get to once we're talking about hardware, that is so quick, it's so fast. And I'm the type of person that likes to go based off of my instinct. When I feel something, I want to execute it really fast. And using the chop function in Ableton has been pretty frustrating, and it's very slow for myself because I have to click a lot and just do my slices. By the time I have like a 2-bar to 4-bar sliced up the way I want it to, I'm kind of done with it and I'm ready to move forward, or I want to go out and take a break and then come back into the studio. Versus on my MPC, I can do that within less than a minute. So that's been pretty frustrating for me, or maybe I'm just not as knowledgeable when it comes down to manually slicing samples using some of the plugins that is provided for us. And now the last thing that I will say with the software, and this has been a huge deal breaker for me, is just running updates. There's updates for your plugins, there's updates for your VSTs, there's updates for your Ableton, and it's frustrating. Now with my hardware, there is updates, but when I run one software update, it updates my whole entire sampler all at once. So that's a lot easier versus trying to update my UAD plugins and then my Soundtoy plugins and then the Arturia plugin. So it gets a little frustrating. I'm a little annoyed of having to download different plugs. I'll say one of my favorite things about working in a standalone unit is that it's a dedicated piece of hardware to produce music. There's no mixing or mastering. I mean, they do give you plugins, but they're not really trying to make this into a mastering DAW or anything like that. It's a production workstation where you could turn it on, start sampling, start sequencing, give it a rough mix, and move on to your next track. So if you're someone that just wants to make music, that wants to make beats and doesn't really care about the technical side of, and just loves the art of sampling and putting drums and rearranging different sounds, a sampler is the right choice for you. So there's still a learning curve, but it's nowhere near as jumping into a DAW and trying to figure out your mixer window, your arranger. There's so much more options in a DAW versus a piece of hardware like an MPC. Learning curve, but it's a lot quicker. And the other thing, once I went back into my MPC and just started making music, again, this is probably a personal thing for me, but it just feels different when I hear it through my speakers. I just love the sound that I'm getting when it comes down to my drums. And now some of the same samples that I'm using some of my one-shots in the DAW, dragging my kick, my snare, my hi-hat, versus when I'm using the same exact one-shots on my MPC, it sounds different. I personally love the taste and flavor of a piece of hardware going through cables versus just dragging them over to my DAW. And now another thing that I was mentioning is the limitation in a piece of hardware. There's not that many options. There's really not a lot of plugins. I think with the MPC, we probably had like 2 compressors, a few EQs, a few reverbs and delays. So I know which ones are my go-to EQs, and that's what I stick with. If I'm even going to use some of the plugins, I just feel and I notice that with when I'm working on my MPC, I'm not really thinking technical the way you'll see on a DAW. I have this compressor, I have this EQ, I have this VOG right here that sounds awesome. Now, don't get me wrong, these sound great, but I'm thinking of like this when I'm here in the DAW, but when I'm on my MPC, I'm not thinking like that. I'm thinking a lot more creative, and I'm pushing through, I'm mixing, not really with plugins, but I'm doing my best to mix sounds. And now, of course, some of the cons working with your piece of hardware, you do have limitations, and one of my #1 limitations, now when it comes down to mixing, yeah, it's probably not the best unit to do a really deep mix in, but I've done great mixes alone with my MPC. There's just one process that I do not feel 100% with, and that's mastering, giving my track a quick master. I have mastered some tracks within the standalone unit or the MPC hardware alone. You could do it, but it's not 100 for me. I've always bounced my tracks into Ableton, and I'll do my mastering in Ableton because it just sounds so much better when I'm using Ableton. So that limitation is not much of a creative limitation that you want to have, but it's just something that I always find myself still going back into the DAW to just finish my entire track. And now that's one of the reasons why coming forward, I want to just find the best of both worlds and see how I can blend these two together. Now, moving forward, one thing that I noticed, and I've not really found, and I'm not gonna make a video on this yet until I'm completely comfortable with the hybrid of the DAW and my piece of hardware. The idea that I have moving forward, doing some of the mixing and mastering with the DAW and doing the production side or the creative side with my MPC or my hardware. That's where I've noticed both worlds match. When it comes down to my DAW, I enjoy mixing and mastering, and when it comes down to my hardware, I enjoy everything that has to do with production and chopping up samples, just being creative alone. That's where it wins for me using my MPC. Now, I don't want to go too long with this because I seriously feel like I can talk about this forever, but I wanted to share this video because I know we're going into this new year, 2024, and there might be a lot of you that are like, you know what, I want to take this a little more serious, or I really want to dedicate some time into really learning, and you you might be in the middle. Should I go with a DAW? Say I'm using Ableton, but it could be any other software, or should I use a piece of hardware like an MPC? And if you're in the middle and you don't really know much of either one or the other, just know that you're in a good place, because you could go left or right, just wherever you feel more inspired or wherever you feel that you can grow with the most. I'm nobody to tell you that you're wrong for going hardware or software. Just whatever you choose, dive into it and give it your all to that method. And then once you understand it and feel very comfortable with it, you might want to incorporate bringing in a piece of hardware or a piece of software, whichever direction you go with. Now, I hope this video was helpful. It's something that I just enjoy talking about, so I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me till the end and just hearing me talk about these two sources of making music. Again, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'll catch y'all on our next video. Peace.